Good evening and thank you for being with us. Premier Doug Ford has announced a new stay-at-home order and declared another state of emergency to try and curb soaring COVID-19 infection rates in Ontario. Ford says residents will be required to remain home starting Thursday, except for essential activities such as grocery shopping or medical appointments. Colin DeMello has more.
Amid the spiral of the second wave of COVID-19 comes action from the provincial government. Premier Doug Ford declared a second state of emergency in Ontario and issued a mandatory order to stay at home.
Under this order, everyone must stay home and only go out for essential trips, to pick up groceries or go to medical appointments.
The additional measures are in direct response to new modeling data, which shows the worst is yet to come, with increased case counts, increased death, and increased pressure on the healthcare system.
We are at a dangerous point.
The province is projecting between 5,000 to 10,000 new cases per day by mid-February, between 500 to 1,000 people in ICU by the middle of next month, between 50 to 100 deaths per day, and 2,600 deaths in long-term care by Valentine's Day under the worst-case scenario. There are also increasing concerns about the new UK variant of the virus. If that highly infectious strain were to take hold and begin to spread in Ontario, it would take just 10 days for this province's case counts to double.
Because it spreads so much more quickly, if it gets out into the community, there is no question that we will have more cases and many more deaths.
And so the province is now reverting back to a version of the initial spring lockdown. You're being asked to work from home and stay at home unless necessary. Outdoor gatherings are now limited to 5 people. Wearing a mask outdoors is now being encouraged. The operating hours for non-essential businesses, hardware stores, and alcohol retailers are now 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. But big box stores, pharmacies, gas stations, convenience stores, and restaurants are exempt. Childcare will remain open, but schools in Toronto, Peel, York, Hamilton, and Windsor will remain closed until February 12th or until the numbers come down.
The system is on the brink of collapse. It's on the brink of being overwhelmed. We're at levels we've never seen before.
The central question remains, how did things get to be this bad? The Premier said today that we should be placing the blame on the virus itself, and public health officials are pointing the finger at the people of this province.
Despite going into a shutdown in the gray zones, people were still moving about. They were going to adjacent regions to go shopping.
As a result, the stay-at-home order will now be enforced as the government looks to increase compliance.
Penalties may include up to a year in jail.
A crackdown as the government looks to control COVID-19.
And we apologize for the video difficulties with that last item. Now, on the heels of the new measures announced today by the Premier, we reached out to Thunder Bay Mayor Bill Morrow to get his reaction to the stay-at-home order. The Mayor has also written a letter to Ford and General Rick Hillier regarding the vaccine rollout plan in our region. Troy Charles has that story.
Mayor Bill Morrow says he understands the concern from the Premier about rising COVID cases and the strain on hospitals in southern Ontario. And he had this reaction to the latest restrictions announced on Tuesday.
The stay-at-home order, they're asking employers, if your staff can work from home, please have them work from home. But it's not a mandated decision. It is a directive. Please do it where you can. I'm not sure what it means for schools. If the stay-at-home order trumps the kids that are in school right now here in a non-hot zone, I'm not certain. We'll get a little bit more of the detail on Thursday in our call with the medical officer of health, I'm sure.
In a statement, City Manager Norm Gale says the city will provide further information in the coming days related to the impacts of the stay-at-home order on the city's outdoor amenities and gathering numbers. Morrow says the province has strayed from its own script by instituting a province-wide lockdown rather than taking a regional approach through its color-coded COVID response framework. When asked if he would ever advocate the province to lift the lockdown order in our region, Morrow said it's certainly possible.
I think there would be a point at which, I won't speculate on what that number would be, that, up until November, for example, we were in single-digit cases pretty much for from March up until November when we had a lockdown. So there could potentially be a point at which I would certainly consider that, yes.
Moore also spoke about his recent letter to Doug Ford and General Rick Hillier, calling on them to modify their vaccine distribution plan for Northwestern Ontario.
As larger and more doses arrive, which will be happening anytime now, as it probably is beginning to happen now, please just consider a few more variables than simply whether you're in the red or gray lockdown area.
To date, the regional hospital has administered the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine to over 900 individuals. This week, they will begin to administer second doses for those eligible. The hospital is running low, but they should be receiving more vaccines this month and have been advocating for larger quantities moving forward. Troy Charles, TBT News.
The Thunder Bay District has its lowest new case count in nearly 2 weeks. The health unit reported just one new case of COVID-19 today. That's the lowest number since December 30th. Today's case comes from the Thunder Bay area and was contracted through close contact. There have now been 671 total cases since the pandemic began. The number of active cases has fallen to 68, that's 7 fewer than on Monday, and there are no new hospitalizations to report. There are still 3 COVID-19 patients in hospital. 2 of those are in the ICU. The health unit has reported at least one case for 67 consecutive days. The last time there were no new daily cases was back on November 5th. There is also good news to report at the Roseview Long-Term Care Home. According to the company's website, there are now 0 active cases amongst residents there. 6 staff members are still infected, however. All of those are recovering at home in isolation. And Mayor Bill Morrow delivered his State of the City address at last night's virtual City Council meeting. It came in the form of a 17-minute pre-recorded video during which the mayor focused mainly on COVID-19.
2020 was to be a year of excitement and celebration for the city of Thunder Bay. Our 50th anniversary, celebrating the amalgamation of the twin cities of Port Arthur and Fort William.
Morrow called the pandemic the greatest challenge the city has seen in generations. He thanked frontline workers and all residents who have adhered to public health guidelines. The mayor also offered condolences to those who have lost loved ones to COVID-19. He then went on to reassure residents about the city's relative economic health on the eve of the first 2021 city budget meeting.
Federal and provincial stimulus money was announced in July, and coupled with decisions taken by council, the city ended 2020 with an operating surplus of $4.2 million. While the city has a projected $8.8 million operating deficit for 2021, we have taken steps and prepared to ensure we can manage this situation on behalf of taxpayers. First, through resolution, we directed administration to bring in a starting 2021 budget of 2% for council deliberation. Council will determine the final number. Second,
the pandemic's expected to cost the city another $8.7 million in 2021. However, as mentioned, there's already $4.2 million set aside from Ottawa and Queen's Park to help cover those costs. Thunder Bay also currently has $12.3 million in its Stabilization Reserve Fund, which can be used to cover COVID expenses. Meanwhile, City Council has approved a municipal loan program to help residents replace lead water pipes on their property. Councillors also rubber stamped the purchase of 6 new Lift Plus buses last night. Ryan Vanazzo has more on that meeting from City Hall.
City Council has unanimously approved a $1.35 million interest-free loan program to help spur the removal of lead water pipes from up to 8,700 homes. Homeowners can get a maximum of $3,000, which is repayable over 5 years or 10 years for low-income residents. Council had already approved a $100,000 grant program, but administration suggested the loans instead, noting more people would be able to access the money. Handing out $1.35 million in loans means about $100,000 in lost interest, thus meeting Council's initial intent. Councillor Andrew Folds, who first proposed the lead replacement program, calls it a creative solution.
Notwithstanding that creativity and innovation, a loan program potentially is still a barrier.
He'd like some low-income residents to receive grants that don't have to be repaid. That's still possible in the future. City staff will report back on the program's effectiveness after this year's construction season. Council also unanimously approved the purchase of 6 new Lift Plus buses. Senior levels of government will cover nearly 3/4 of the $1.3 million spend through the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. That leaves the city to pay about $315,000. 4 of the new vehicles will replace older buses in the fleet, leaving 2 others to be added to the daily deployment, which will rise from 16 to 18.
The more buses we have available on the road, the more trips we can book.
Monday's meeting was also the first for McKellar Ward Councillor Brian Hamilton in more than 2 months. Hamilton took a leave of absence in November, citing personal reasons. And it was announced at that meeting that one of the longest-serving members of administration is retiring. Development and Emergency Services General Manager Mark Smith is calling it a career after nearly 30 years with the city. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Fort William First Nation has a new band councillor, and she's already eyeing the Chiefs chair in the next general election. Bonnie Pelche was one of 8 candidates running for the 1 vacant council seat in yesterday's by-election. Voting was held throughout the day at the First Nations Community Centre, and although the official vote results have not yet been released, unofficial results show Pelche received 59 votes, 11 more than runner-up former band CAO Ken Ogama, who received 48. Pelche ran for chief of Fort William in April of 2019 against longtime chief Peter Collins. She finished about 50 votes behind him. The next general election will take place in April of 2023, and Pelche is already planning to run for chief again at that time. Parents of children in the Lakehead Public School system are getting another opportunity to make the switch between online and in-person classes. And the board's expecting even more families to choose to have their kids in class come February. Parents have until Friday to make the switch. Currently, about 85% of students in both high school and elementary grades are learning in the classroom. Students had just come off a week of virtual classes, and many parents expressed concern with their own work schedules if virtual learning needed to continue. Lakehead Board Superintendent A.J. Keane is predicting more students will opt in to the physical classroom learning, but he thinks many will wait until the end of the transfer date to see what else comes from the province.
We've given ourselves plenty of time to be able to make all the changes. In secondary, it's really about timetabling. In elementary, it may be moving staff around if we see significant numbers increase in the virtual school, or the other way, if we see a lot of kids coming back to school, we might have to add staff there. So we do need the time to be able to sort all that out.
Keane says the school board is well prepared for supplying PPE if more students do return to class. The Catholic board was not available for comment about their plans for students opting in or opting out. Well, one thing the pandemic could not alter in 2020 was the success of the Port of Thunder Bay. Year-end cargo statistics were released today, and for the first time since 1997, the port saw 10 million metric tons of cargo pass through. Those stats come as the last ship of the season, the Saginaw, loaded up at Richardson Terminal and left port this afternoon. Port Authority CEO says he's pleased to see those final numbers. That 10 million metric tons of cargo in 2020 is a 10% increase from the year before. Grain shipments represented the bulk of that, with over 9.2 million metric tons. Heaney attributes it to many countries who are building up their grain reserves to supplement their food supply during the pandemic.
Well, it was a pretty remarkable year for us. Grain led the charge, and it was our best year since '97 in total. So I have to say, given what happened on the Seaway and during the pandemic, we're probably one of the brightest lights on the Seaway. It shows the importance of exports from Western Canada driving the Seaway system, and Thunder Bay is the largest export port on the system. So,
another number that jumps out is the 157 foreign vessels that arrived in port during the year. That's the second highest total in port history. Overall, 482 vessels made their way to Thunder Bay in 2020. The new shipping season is expected to begin around March 25th. The Thunder Bay and District Humane Society continues to adjust its operations due to COVID-19 restrictions. Staff there have seen a big increase in adoptions as of late. And with the recent reopening of their low-cost spay-neuter clinic, the demand for service is even higher. Kayla Karim reports.
The Humane Society shelter has been open for contactless adoption and surrender services since the beginning of the pandemic. Last week, they reported to have no animals available to adopt, but that has quickly changed with 22 cats arriving on Monday. Because of the stay-at-home order announced by the Ford government, the facility will most likely have to send their animals to foster homes in order to have space for potential new animals. Executive Director Shauna Beaulieu says she noticed a positive trend in adoptions and sending animals to foster care wouldn't be a major issue.
Yeah, adoptions are going super well. So there does seem to be an increase for adoptions. I would say even timelines. Our animals are getting into homes so much quicker, of course, because of our awesome clinic team and their support. That helps a lot. But we've also been getting a lot of applicants. We have that strong support of foster homes. So if we had to put our adoption program on hold, we would most likely move our animals into foster homes.
Meanwhile, the low-cost spay-neuter clinic recently reopened part-time after their veterinarian returned from maternity leave. The program currently allows for 10 appointments 3 days a week, compared to the 20 to 30 appointments 4 days a week. Beaulieu says appointment slots filled up online in less than a minute on Friday.
Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, our vet working only part-time right now. She's still on a partial mat leave, having a brand new clinic team. We're not able to accommodate as many appointments as we used to, although we hope to be able to increase the number of appointments that we're doing in March.
Although the demand for services have been high at the Humane Society, staff wants to let the public know that they are doing their best to accommodate in a safe and healthy environment. Kayla Karim, TBT News.